Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. I'm joined this evening by two of our most regular guests. I'm joined firstly by Sam Paton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign. Sam, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Kerry. How are you?
I'm not bad. And on the other side of me we have Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Kenny. How are you? I'm fine.
I'm not bad at all. So, sorry, I know we had let some people know that Anne McLaughlin was going to be on the show tonight, but unfortunately she had to cancel at the last minute. We do hope we'll get her back another time soon. But we start, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. And as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there had been a total of 116,848 coronavirus tests concluded. Of these, 101,377 were confirmed negative and 15,471 tests were positive. Last night, there were 712 people in hospital with suspected or confirmed COVID-19, 20 of whom were in intensive care, with another 14 with suspected COVID-19 also in intensive care. That marks an increase of 53 confirmed new cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection has sadly risen to 2,375. This number only includes those who died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. We'll have a more complete look at those figures tomorrow when the National Records for Scotland publish their report. And the latest UK daily figures available show that 39,369 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 324. That number does now refer to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And as it's Tuesday, the Office for National Statistics has also today published its weekly analysis of all deaths in England and Wales for week 21, which is the week ending May 22nd. These statistics showed that up to May 22nd, England and Wales saw a total of 56,308 excess deaths during the period of the pandemic. As we've mentioned before, not all of these have been directly linked to COVID-19, and the ONS is due to publish a further analysis of those deaths this Friday. 43,837 of those deaths were directly linked to the coronavirus infection, though. Both of these measures suggest that the UK has had amongst the worst outcomes in the world so far from the pandemic, and England appears to have had the worst outcomes amongst the four nations. While the number of new cases and deaths each day does continue to decline, it should be noted that England is still experiencing up to 1,000 new cases per day. Italy entered lockdown back in March when new cases were at that same level. And we start with the rest of the news in the United States. And President Donald Trump provoked a fearful response yesterday when he warned that he would deploy the US military to restore order if local law enforcement across America could not contain protests following the death of African American George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police. Very large, occasionally violent protests erupted in major cities throughout the country after footage went viral on social media of Floyd dying as a white police officer knelt on his neck after arresting him. Police responses have varied. Images shared widely in the media show several officers shaking hands with protesters and even kneeling to show solidarity with the protests. But social media reports suggest this may have been for show, with a much more heavy-handed approach taken when the cameras were gone. Other footage, some broadcast live on TV, has shown journalists and protesters, especially black people, being assaulted and arrested by police. Many protesters have been injured by rubber bullets and tear gas, some apparently fired from near point-blank range. Nationwide, 5 police officers are reported to have been shot and wounded. Trump said last night, if a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them. Lawyers and political opponents have questioned whether such action is legal under the Constitution. Around 29 states have already deployed National Guard units to assist local police, but Trump's suggestion would be unprecedented and has been framed by his opponents as a declaration of war on America's black citizens. And Sam, if I could come to you first, what's been your reaction to Donald Trump's language around these protests?
He is an absolute lunatic. It's the politest way I can put it. He is not a leader. He is a lunatic, and all he's doing is inciting more trouble. He's not exactly helping the situation. He's not even kind of trying to understand why people are out protesting. And it's just he's just unbelievable. Sitting watching it, it's dumbfounding. But then again, I'm not surprised. It's Donald Trump. He's not even. I mean, with George Floyd, he gets arrested for trying to buy food with allegedly a fake £20, a $20 note. I was going to say £20 note there, and that's just the way he was treated was absolutely unacceptable. But it shows the inequality that's going on in America with the police regarding people from African American backgrounds. And I don't know if you'd seen, but there was a video on social media yesterday, and it was an FBI agent being arrested because the police automatically assumed that he was a protester because of the colour of his skin. And it was quite embarrassing for them when they arrested him and basically went into his pocket and pulled out his FBI ID. And it's just, this is what Trump needs to be dealing with. The bottom line, which is the inequality and why is there inequality, but he's just adding more and more fuel to the fire, and he's not helping at all. He's actually creating this himself. He is actually encouraging this inequality, and it is unbelievable to sit back and watch in this day and age.
Yeah. If you do want to join in the conversation at home, you can do that. You'll see on screen now. You can follow us on Twitter at BroadcastScot, and you can join the conversation using the hashtag Scotland@7. That's Scotland AT and the number 7. Use that hashtag. We'll pick those tweets up and we'll bring them up on the screen during the show. We'd love to hear what you've got to say about these stories. But Chris, I mean, this is the president who said during protests several years ago where neo-Nazis were present, that there were very fine people on both sides. Now, he has, in fairness, condemned the death of George Floyd, has said that was inappropriate, but his response to these protests has not really shown any empathy with the people who are quite rightly very angry about the state of America today. What do you think it is about Trump that just doesn't want to see the side of the oppressed?
Possibly because racist people don't know that they're racists. And I have to put the George Floyd situation to one side at the moment, because it's not just, sadly, it's not just George Floyd. There was an incident in Louisville in Kentucky where the owner of a barbecue shop sadly lost his life. David McAtee. This man was known for offering meals to police officers, and he died while police officers and National Guard soldiers were enforcing a curfew, and that was brought on directly by Trump's actions, and that could have been avoidable. So it's whilst the death of George Floyd is horrific, sadly he is not alone, and it really does frighten me, and it would possibly frighten anybody of a moderate mind to want to actually go and visit America, because what's happening right now is very, very frightening. The outlawing of the Antifa movement is absolutely horrendous. Whilst I do concede that they do some acts of violence themselves, wanton destruction and graffiti and the likes, we have seen pictures from Texas where they actually coerced the police to kneel down and join them in kneeling down as a show of solidarity. And what we can see now is the fact that Trump is like a headless chicken, because his governors are not playing ball. most of his moderate-thinking governors have actually got a lot of sympathy for the black community within America, and they're not willing to join in this only can be described as a witch hunt against black Americans, Afro-Americans. Even as I said last night, America is such an intolerant country where you've got racism against Mexicans, Hispanics, Chinese, Koreans. It's absolutely horrendous. And honestly, Kenny, if you were to offer me a ticket tomorrow, I would not go.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, we can't pretend we're blameless in these kind of things. Obviously, cases like the Sheikh Ubayo case still linger over police in Scotland. But as Chris said, Sam, this isn't just about George Floyd. This is about a whole lot of cases like this that have bubbled up over years. And then on top of that, we've seen that black Americans have been more likely to die from the COVID infection, as we've seen here, a report released here saying the same thing is happening in Britain. And also that black Americans have suffered more from the economic downturn, given that they tend to be employed more in the kind of jobs that have been lost due to the coronavirus crisis. What do you think are the steps that need to be taken to start maybe building some bridges here? How do you think America could start to rebuild from this?
Crikey, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because basically the underlying problem is inequality, and that's what's happening. And it's been bubbling, as you said, it's been bubbling on for years, and it's not just George Floyd, there's so many other people. And that is the problem. This is something that has been going on for years, probably decades, century, for a couple of centuries in America, this inequality, and especially with COVID at the moment, it's brought it all to the forefront. As you said, people from Black Americans, Chinese, all these different races, you've got people that are working on the front line. They're the ones that are putting themselves more at risk. They're they're your kind of bus drivers, your street cleaners, your carers, all these kind of frontline jobs that we really rely on, even here in the UK, and they're the ones that are most at risk. And according to the statistics, some of the statistics that are coming out with COVID, black people are more likely to get COVID, have got a higher risk of catching COVID. So it's just absolutely horrendous. This is people's lives, it's people's livelihoods, it's everything, it's their futures, and they are being totally left to rot at the moment in America. And it's just, I don't know what the answer is, and it's certainly not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just adding more and more fuel to the fire. He is not helping matters. He's going to end up creating a civil war over there with the type of language he is using. As I say, I don't know what the answer is at this moment in time, because this has been something that's been going on for a long time. It's not just something that's happened in recent years. It's been going on for a long, long time. And I would imagine in a lot of sides there'll be a lot of trust that's been lost, and especially from people from the communities that have been suffering from the inequalities from law enforcement and from central government and local government. There'll be a lot of trust that's been lost. So I really don't know the answer, Kenny. I really don't.
No, I don't think many of us do. Obviously, we'll keep following that story as it develops, but it certainly doesn't seem like those protests are likely to die down very quickly. Back in the UK, though, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, the leader of the House of Commons, has come under increasing criticism for his insistence that the UK Parliament return to meeting in person, despite the severe limits this places on many MPs' abilities to participate. Virtual participation, which had been welcomed by many MPs during the period of maximum lockdown, has now ended, with new rules meaning only 50 members can be in the chamber at any one time, and voting requires members to stand in long, physically distanced queues that snake all the way around the Palace of Westminster. This makes the process even more cumbersome and time-consuming than traditional lobby divisions, and much less efficient than the remote electronic voting that was pioneered to cope with lockdown restrictions. The changes have been criticised by some Tory backbenchers. Robert Halfon, the MP for Harlow and chair of the Education Select Committee, is shielding at home for health reasons and has urged Rees-Mogg to reconsider. He's joined by Karen Bradley, Caroline Noakes and Julian Knight from the government benches, while there is nearly unanimous support for virtual participation to continue amongst opposition parties. SNP MPs have been particularly strong on this issue because they don't wish to take risks with Scotland's lockdown rules by travelling to London unless absolutely necessary. Rebecca Hilsenrath, Chief Executive of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, has also written to Vicky Foxcroft, the Shadow Disabilities Minister, to say that it cannot be right to have a parliament that so clearly excludes older MPs and those with health or caring concerns. She said, proceedings in Parliament must remain fully inclusive during the coronavirus pandemic. And Chris, I mean, this is pretty blatant disability discrimination in that people who are, and age discrimination, in that people who are in certain categories simply cannot attend the Parliament now, which means that they and their constituents are disenfranchised. What does this say about UK democracy?
It honestly doesn't say an awful lot. Excuse me, Kenny. And it's not often you'll hear me agreeing with the Tory MP, Robert Halfon, although he's a wee bit of a mixed fruit, to be honest with you, because I watched his interview where he said that he was deeply upset that he can't sort of like participate, but he understands completely and has. And Jacob Rees-Mogg has his full backing and endorsement, and I'm like that. What planet are you on, mate? But putting it onto a Scottish issue, we've also got Dr. Philippa Whitward, who is also in that shielding community, so she can't attend. And Ian Blackford asked a question on her behalf today. And we've also got, is it Jamie Stone? The MP for the Liberal MP. Yeah. Again, he's a carer for his disabled wife, so I can tune into the principles that he holds. And we also heard from Ian Carmichael as well, basically saying that he has been forced to live in London at the behest of Rees-Mogg in order that he can do his job. So, we have, what we can see is people who are, how can you say this? They are. Some MPs are principled in their stance. Some people are willing to bend the rules in order to accommodate Rees-Mogg. Other people are willing to stay silent, except for when they take to social media in order to take a picture of the foliage that they're standing in outside Portcullis House, citing a certain Ian Murray. And it is, if this does not highlight how broken the Westminster system is, the Westminster democracy, then I honestly don't know what Scottish people. I don't see what further evidence Scottish people need in order to make an informed choice that not only should our MPs not be there, but we shouldn't be part of this archaic circus.
Sam, I mean, this is obviously the limits on participation in the chamber make things really, really difficult for democracy to be seen to be done. But this question of voting, where voting is going to become so much more laborious than it already was, which was already ridiculously time-consuming, it's going to make it a lot less likely that MPs are going to want to vote on things. I mean, how much of a challenge does this pose to actual democracy happening?
Basically, they're stripping democracy away. And also, as well, it's deliberate because if MPs cannot attend Parliament, they're not able to represent the constituents that they're meant to represent, and they're not able to vote to or against whatever motion's been put up. So to me, it's actually it's been done deliberately, and you know, and the one group of people it's going to affect more than anything who stay furthest away from Westminster, we all know. But also as well, it's not just affecting them, it's affecting people, it's cross-party due to people shielding, and it's making people have to pick between their duties at Parliament or their families, which is wrong. It's just absolutely wrong. But yeah, it just goes to show you the state of democracy. It's literally, there's not much left of it, to be honest with you. COVID's basically shown that there's not much left of it, and especially whether it's the UK as the four nations or it's just with England on its own, there is no democracy pretty much left. It's hanging on by a thread if I'm going to say there's any democracy, and I'm not surprised the Tories are using this to their advantage.
Mm-hmm. Well, we move on now, and the SNP's Shadow Home Secretary Joanna Cherry MP has criticised the Home Secretary over the ongoing lack of public health protections at UK ports and airports. Plans to introduce quarantine measures were originally announced very late, and now reports signal they are to be severely watered down before they have been implemented. The UK has been one of the few countries to have no public health measures in place for people entering the country throughout the crisis. The reported relaxation of the measures could be brought before Parliament by Priti Patel soon and would allow people travelling to the UK to move between different accommodation, use public transport and go food shopping, with only a fifth of people subject to spot checks. Commenting, Joanna Cherry said, "The Home Secretary's reported plans to water down the already delayed quarantine measures shows how shambolic these proposals are, and how recklessly out of step the UK has been since the beginning of the pandemic." And Sam, coming back to you, this is something we've talked about before. Brexit Britain unwilling to close its borders, every other country in the EU and most other countries around the world willing to at least put in restrictions of some kind. What is wrong with the British government that they've been so resistant to putting in these quarantine type measures? And do you think these new measures, these changes that Priti Patel is expected to announce, are going to have any effect?
They're just absolute loonies. Honest to goodness, they are just, honestly, right from day one with COVID, and even just before COVID, when they get elected in, you know, after the general election, they're just absolute lunatics. It's nothing makes sense. Absolutely nothing makes sense. I honestly believe, if it's not already done, I don't know if this gets done, so somebody can correct me. But I honestly think in order to be sitting in government, you should be assessed by a psychiatrist. Really assessed by a psychiatrist to see where you are in terms of empathy, you know, problem solving, and because some of the things are just so simple, and you just think, really, honestly, they just don't get this. You know, put some checks on the border, bit of common sense. Joe Public can tell you that. But no, they're just loonies, Kenny. They're none of it makes sense. But I really think they should all need to get a psych evaluation. I really do.
Yeah, and Chris, I mean, this is a weird thing, isn't it? Given that all this Brexit talk, ever since 2016 and before, has been all about we need to be able to control our borders, and yet the one time when we really did need our borders controlled is the one time the British government has decided not to put in any controls. What do you think it is that's stopping them?
lunacy, absolute lunacy. Sorry, I mean, while Sam was talking there, I actually just went away and researched something. What I need to highlight is that because of the rhetoric coming out of the Westminster front bench with regards borders and checks and all the rest of it, we have to think about the wider implications to our EU countries. As of today, 22 countries within Europe are not allowing any tourists from the UK. And that is a direct action against what they see the lack of ability to tackle the COVID pandemic properly, and that is to do with from procurement all the way through to checking passengers at airports. There's absolutely no checks on anybody coming in to the UK at this moment in time. I heard a story today that they are considering randomised checking. So that could be anything between 25 and 50 people off of an A300, which carries up to 180 people.
Yeah.
And that is simply not good enough. It really isn't. This, again, it goes towards the fact that I firmly believe that they still have the ethos of the herd immunity at its core. What we see with the Tory government is that they do want to have their cake and eat it. They want to streamline the population at the same time as restarting their capitalist hamster wheel in order to try and get further ahead than any other country in the developed Western world, so that they can do a deal with America, who we've already discussed is completely bereft of any coherent policies, let alone talk about trade or anything like that. I wouldn't want to be dealing with a country that is basically allowing their police officers to put their foot on someone's neck. So I would strongly argue the fact that Scotland needs to get out of this unholy and unequal union, because clearly it's not working from the policies that are espoused by people like Priti Patel, the anarchic actions of Jacob Rees-Mogg, the woeful inadequacies of Keir Starmer on the Labour benches. I'm near to tears here. I'm asking Scotland to wake up and smell the coffee, and ask your MPs, what are we doing here? Why are we in this?
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris, on that note, we will move on. I'm sure you'll have more chances to put the world to rights as we get through these stories. But the SNP has called on a UK government minister to step down while police assess a decision by Housing Minister Robert Jenrick, who unlawfully approved a £30 million development in London by Tory donor Richard Desmond. News broke late last night that complaints against Mr Jenrick are being assessed by the Metropolitan Police. The UK Housing Secretary had admitted his decision to sign off a 1,500 home development was unlawful by reason of apparent bias, but the police intervention marks a step up in the seriousness of the allegations. SNP shadow spokesperson for Housing, Communities and Local Government, David Linden MP, said, Robert Jenrick's latest scandal only adds to the credibility problem that the Tories have, and confirms that their narrow political ideology is put before following the rules. The UK government clearly thinks there can be one set of rules for the public and another for those in positions of power. It absolutely stinks that a serving UK minister admits to unlawfully approving a housing development by a party donor, but it's even more galling that he does not step down while the police investigation takes place. So Sam, should Robert Jenrick step down over this investigation?
Yes. Basically, if there's a police investigation, even if it's just temporary step down, he should be temporarily stepping down. I'm sure that in the kind of real world with the rest of us, if we're being investigated by the police in our work or jobs or whatever, you're temporarily suspended, while the investigation goes on. So yes, he should be suspended. Is this to do with the one that the reporter brought up during one of the daily briefings?
I'm not 100%
sure. Because I know last week there was one of the journalists at the daily briefings had brought up an incident of very like this, and he had been out to dinner with the company, and but he had claimed on air that he had followed all the criteria. But if he's going out for dinner, meals and things like that, dinner, then that's a different story. But it'd be interesting to see this. I'll need to kind of do a wee bit of digging after this and to see if this is the same kind of.
I'm not 100% sure it is that.
At the end of the day, he should be stepping down at least, even if it's only temporary, while the police are doing the investigation, because. At the end of the day, in the real world, that's what the rest of us have got to do if we're ever caught up in any form of investigation at work, for any wrongdoing or misconduct or anything, you generally kind of... So I think, but the thing is, the problem that's happening, as we keep seeing, is what happens in the real world with the rest of us, and what rules happen for the ones that are in the Tory government is a total different total different sets of rules and total different sets of standards, and that's becoming more apparent as time is going on.
Yeah, well, back in Scotland now, and the Scottish Government must match its rhetoric on an economic revolution with action to provide financial security for the most vulnerable in society, the Scottish Greens have warned. Economy Secretary Fiona Hislop has promised a revolution in economic thinking which would lead to a well-being economy. Scottish Greens community spokesperson Andy Whiteman raised this at a debate on economic recovery at the Scottish Parliament. Speaking ahead of the debate, Andy Whiteman said, "I welcome the language from the Minister, but the time for a well-being economy is now, when people are paying the highest price for having insecure incomes and living arrangements. The economy is not solely about the interests of businesses. It is about workers, it's about infrastructure, about care, about housing and the environment. It's time the SNP matched its rhetoric with action. In emergency laws, they sided with the Tories to support landlords over private tenants, rejecting all my proposals to provide much-needed relief to those facing hardship and eviction. They will need to change those priorities quickly." And Chris, this is something we're going to be talking about this actually on a special show on Friday, all about this well-being economy idea that's really started to take hold recently. Do you feel confident that the Scottish Government is really behind this idea and is not just throwing out warm words?
Well, I think it is. Quintessentially, I think it is. But at the moment, that I have misgivings about the level of scrutiny that is going through the Scottish Government by the SNP on things that are not related to COVID at this moment in time. And it was brought to my attention by a friend of mine, Mike Daly, who works at the Govan Law Centre, and he brought it to my attention that Claire Baker, MSP, had brought forward a motion bill for private rent, thus highlighting the inequality that is in that sector. And I wholeheartedly agree. The people who profiteer out of other people's misery by charging them extortionate rents and stuff like that, as one that the SNP should be tackling head on, and we should be getting a cross-party consensus from Labour, the Greens, and the SNP. You would think that you would maybe get something coming out of the Lib Dems. You definitely won't get anything coming out of the Tories. So this is something that should pass, and it should pass with a majority. Equally, again, there are other things. I would like to highlight the fact that, again, a Labour motion that was backed unanimously by the trade union group, that is to do with corporate manslaughter, and it's been endorsed by the STUC as well. And these are the bread and butter issues that the SNP need to be talking about in order to allow them to platform the fact that they are getting on with the day job, as well as dealing with the COVID pandemic. So there are more socialist values that we have to share, and I know that doesn't sit very well with the talking about socialism and Labour, especially Scottish Labour. But there are issues out there that we can coalesce around a good agreement going forward. And it would just further highlight the inadequacies of the unequal union that we unfortunately find ourselves in.
Sure. Well, we move to the Pacific now, and Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam accused foreign governments today of double standards in their reaction to Beijing's plans to impose national security laws on the city, pointing to the anti-police protests in the US. In her first public appearance after Washington said it will remove Hong Kong's preferential treatment in US law in response to Beijing's plans, Lam warned that countries threatening actions against the city that they may hurt their own interests. They are very concerned about their own national security, but on our national security, they look through tinted glasses, Lam told a weekly news conference. In the US, we see how the riots were being handled by the local governments compared to the stance they adopted when almost the same riots happened in Hong Kong last year. Having lost patience with Hong Kong after large-scale and sometimes violent pro-democracy protests in the Chinese-ruled city last year, Beijing authorities last month set out plans to introduce laws tackling secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign interference. The laws could also see Chinese intelligence agencies set up shop in the global financial hub. US President Donald Trump saying Hong Kong was no longer sufficiently autonomous from Beijing as promised at the time of the 1997 handover from Britain to China, said that Hong Kong will no longer be treated differently from China in US law. And Sam, obviously we've been talking about the protests in Hong Kong for quite some time, but these new laws being introduced seem to crack down even harder on the Hong Kong protesters. What do you make of this from Carrie Lam? This idea that basically the US has got no right to criticise how they handle protests when Trump is talking about setting the military on protesters in his own country.
She is kind of right, because at the end of the day, he's dealing with protesters, and funny enough about human rights and things like that as well, in a similar sort of fashion as to China. So she is kind of right. But yeah, Beijing is determined, absolutely determined to bring Hong Kong into line with the rest of China, and they're just not for stopping. They are just, I just dread to think what's going to happen next there in Hong Kong, as the protests and things carry on. It's just absolutely horrendous. And again, that's another one where I don't know what the answer is. I don't know, how do you get around that? Because Hong Kong is genuinely a kind of independent entity away from Beijing. Oh, okay, they're under the Beijing rule, but they're certainly trying to enforce Beijing idealistics and ideology and everything onto Hong Kong, which Hong Kong's not had for a long, long time.
Yeah. And Chris, is there anything that you think the UK government should be doing to help address the crisis in Hong Kong?
Well, I think actually, and I'm sorry if I sound like I'm contradicting you, Sam, but I'm led to believe that Hong Kong is still under a certain amount of British rule until I think it's 2040, 2045, before various competencies get transferred to Beijing. They're going through this transition period, and I think that Britain should be, it should be more robust in standing up for the citizens of Hong Kong. But what we see here is, again, the other side of the globe. We're looking at a kind of fascism which is being imposed upon the people of Hong Kong against their will. They have enjoyed complete autonomy from the communist ruling of China. They are pretty much been. There are in Hong Kong there are British bars and British pubs, and you can buy Yorkshire pudding and a roast dinner and whatnot and what have you. They're a very welcoming and international city. And now you see Beijing, they are wanting to grab all their rights years before they actually should do. And it's quite right that the people of Hong Kong want to try and resist that.
Yeah. Well, back to Europe now, and the UK government will not compromise on fisheries or demands from the European Union on level playing field guarantees on fair competition, a spokesman for Prime Minister Boris Johnson said today. We have always been clear that there is no question of splitting the difference on the level playing field and fish. We aren't compromising on these because our position on these is fundamental to an independent country, he told reporters. Any agreement has to deal with this reality. The statement came as EU negotiators warned that a deal would have to be done on fisheries by the end of June to ensure that quota levels can be set in good time for the transition period to end at the end of 2020. Sam, again, this is one we've talked about for some time on the show. What is it you think that's making the British government so unwilling to either compromise or to extend this period of discussion to at least allow for the pandemic to pass before they get into the heat of negotiations?
Well, what can I say, Kenny? They're loonies, they're arrogant, they've just decided that they're right and what they're doing is right, and they're just going ahead. They're like bulls in a china shop. And yeah, I just don't get it. I really don't get it at all. I'll go back to my previous statement. I think any member of government should take part in a psychiatric test. And it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And I think we're going to be having these conversations right up until the deadline. They are determined we're going to have a no-deal Brexit. They are going to use COVID as an excuse, and they're just not willing to compromise. It's their way or no way.
Yeah, we should remind you there has to be a deal agreed by the end of this month if there's going to be any extension of the transition period. Otherwise, we will leave all EU organisations. We will stop being treated as an EU member on December the 31st. And then, goodness knows what happens next year. So we will be watching the EU negotiations very closely over the next few weeks. But back in Scotland, and Police Scotland has reported that 2 people have been charged in connection with culpable and reckless conduct after needing rescued from a Munro on Saturday the 30th of May. A 27-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman have been reported to the Procurator Fiscal after travelling more than 60 miles from Glasgow to climb Benachron near Crianlarich. Police received a report of a man and a woman in difficulty on the Munro around 2:40 p.m. on Saturday. Officers and members of the Culin Mountain Rescue Team were subsequently deployed to rescue the individuals who had not been suitably equipped for the climb. They were found safe and well. Chief Inspector Jill Marshall, Area Commander for Stirling, said, "The actions of this man and woman and their lack of equipment not only placed themselves at risk of injury, but also the officers and mountain rescue volunteers who were called to assist them. The regulations remain that people should only leave the house for very limited purposes, for example, for basic necessities, for exercise or recreation, for medical needs, or travelling for work which cannot be done from home." And Chris, I mean, people just shouldn't be going out mountain climbing during lockdown, should they?
Well, they bloody well shouldn't be. Not only are they putting themselves at risk, they're also taking the emergency services time, in order to save them. And, out with COVID, we would actually be scratching our heads and wondering why anybody would want to go climbing a mountain without the correct gear. I believe this couple were just wearing sandshoes, plimsolls and all the rest of it. No ropes, harnesses, carabiners, hard hats, survival kit, water, nothing. They just went for a wander. Mm-hmm. What is wrong with these people? Sam's asking for MPs to get tested. I think, unionists should be. I'm doing it.
To be fair, we don't know the politics of these people.
No, but they have obviously got. There's a certain disregard for the advice given out by the Scottish Government, and I've witnessed it as well. I've had people tutting at me in the supermarket because I'm wearing a mask, and I actually stopped and wondered why. What were they tutting at? The fact that I was wearing a mask, or the fact that I had an SNP badge on, or what is it? What is it that they're tutting about? And it's not just this couple that went up a tree of the Trossachs or something like that with Lady Bridalbin. Sam's witnessed it down at Balloch. Where you've got people converging down at Lush Bay Marina. Mm-hmm. We had people in the Botanic Gardens in Glasgow and stuff like that, and all the rest of it. There is a certain lack of apathy out in the wider community, which is going to push us back in the easing of lockdown. And I would only put a plea out to these people. I'm choking to go to the pub for a pint. Go to do what you're told. And the quicker you do that you're told, we will be able to go out and at least have a pint in a pub garden.
Yeah. We will just remind you, the rules still say you should be staying at home for the vast majority of time. You can go out, you can go a wee bit further away from home than before, but you should still be you shouldn't be anywhere where you need to use another loo than the one in your home. That's the short answer to what we should be doing. Being very careful about who we meet up with and so on. As Chris says, everything we all do makes a difference to everyone. You can meet with one household up to a maximum of 8 people, but otherwise we should be trying still to stay at home and minimise the amount that we're going out. As Chris said, it's all of us are protecting each other as we do this. So yeah, do please avoid climbing mountains. But back at Holyrood, and businesses across the country have now been awarded more than £100 million through the Scottish Government Business Support Fund. The scheme, announced by Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop at the end of April, has to date helped more than 2,500 businesses and 4,160 self-employed people. Now the fund, which started with £100 million of grant support for individuals and companies affected by COVID-19 and has since been topped up to £185 million, is being expanded. Small B&Bs who were ineligible for other support due to not having a business bank account will be able to apply for a share of £3 million of funding, which has been repurposed from the newly self-employed hardship fund. This funding for small B&Bs will be administered by local authorities, and applications are expected to open on the 15th of June. And Sam, as a self-employed person, how have you found this level of support? Has it been easy to access? Have you found?
Yeah, I was kind of left it a bit kind of later. I left it, allowed all the kind of mad rush at the beginning, but then I applied for it, and yeah, it just, something, it just takes a weight off your mind. It really does take a weight off your mind, because for those weeks and everything, I was worried sick about how I was going to keep the business going, how I was going to survive. You're just kind of living day to day, week to week, not knowing. I mean, thing is, with being self-employed, you can basically try to project what your earnings are going to be, and you're always aware that there's certain times of the years that you may not have a wage, or so you always try to have something in backup to get you through those periods of time. And obviously COVID came along and was very much we knew about it from January, but we didn't know how it was going to kind of hit us. So yeah, you've got your wee backup, but that backup doesn't last very long. And so you do get quite worried, and I know a lot of other people that are self-employed like myself, very worried, very distressed, not knowing how they're going to get through it. But as the help and the support is now starting to filter through, you're seeing more and more people a wee bit happier, and with a smile on their face, and a wee bit more relaxed, and they can see light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that what I'm doing is I'm now transitioning my business to be more working from home, and doing that. And other people are doing the same. A lot of people are using the money to, just kind of try and change how they work.
Sure.
So it makes, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, so it's quite hard to project what's going to happen, how long we're going to be in lockdown, or when we're going to go back into lockdown, and all these different scenarios. We don't know. That's the bottom line. We don't know. So as a backup, I'm now focused on the fact that I'm going to be, for the kind of near future, working from home, a home working kind of environment more than anything. And a lot of people are now doing that. And that's what they're using the money to do, is just to kind of just slightly change their business, not change their business, but change how their working environment and things like that. So which is just taking a weight off a lot of people's minds. It really has. And it's great, but unfortunately, there's some people that are falling through the cracks, and the ones that we know within our community. We're trying to support them as well, and we're trying to keep business within the self-employed community. So the monies, we're trying to kind of keep the money going. So that's happening more at the moment. I know within the community, I'm in the kind of artistic kind of craft community. Very much people are kind of making sure that they're getting work direct from each other to keep the money kind of circulating, and hoping that everybody gets a bit of support. If they're not getting support off the government, at least they're getting business coming in and supporting each other. And advertising each other as well. That's one of the things that we do quite a lot of on social media. We do to kind of advertise each other quite a lot, and recommend each other quite a lot as well. So, but yeah, we're getting there. The one people I know, we're getting there. It was a bit bleak for a while, but there's now light at the end of the tunnel thanks to the support that we've been getting. So hopefully, that'll be a lot of small businesses which will make it through the other end of COVID and be able to contribute towards the economy as well, because that's what, and hopefully the businesses can grow and then start looking at employing other people.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly hope so. And our final story this evening, new Scottish Health Service workforce statistics were published today, showing employment in the health service at a new all-time high. Commenting on the figures, Health Secretary Jean Freeman said, "Our NHS is built on the hard work, skill and dedication of its staff, and in these unprecedented times we thank them for their incredible efforts during the ongoing coronavirus emergency." NHS Scotland staffing has increased to a new record high level, having increased by over 16,000 whole-time equivalent staff, or by 12.9% under this government. These statistics predate the further additional staff who entered the NHS workforce in response to COVID-19. As we remobilise NHS Scotland in the coming weeks and months, we will continue to work to have the right staff in the right place at the right time to deliver the high-quality care which meets Scotland's needs. Chris, what do you think about the state of the NHS at the moment?
The Scottish NHS is absolutely wonderful. I think it's in its best place than it's ever been. I think we can see record investment by the Scottish Government to radically help and reform how the NHS works, in stark contrast to the burgeoning carbuncle that we see down in England, and sadly in Wales by the mismanagement of Welsh Labour. We should be happy the fact that our NHS, sadly due to the pandemic, but it's actually a bit of a growth industry in Scotland, I would urge all those new employees into the health service to get out there and join a union, obviously, and protect yourselves and protect the enhanced rights that Scottish doctors and nurses and paramedics and hospital staff enjoy, due to the policies that the SNP government have actually managed to get through Holyrood. So now's a really good time to be. Well, not now, as the NHS is enjoying somewhat of a rebirth. It is a precarious time to work within the NHS, but I think it's also a very rewarding time to be in the NHS. And as we can see, that Scotland doesn't have to rely on the UK for procurement. Ivan McKee's done a wonderful job in sourcing procurement of personal protection equipment from all across Europe. We now see the knock-on effects into industry, where there are small companies who are making PPE. That's companies that are actually stitching scrubs together and gowns, factories producing gloves, masks as well. We've got breweries producing, hand sanitizer. I think that we will come out of the pandemic with the Scottish Health Service in a better place than what it went into it.
Yeah, well, we certainly hope so, and we do, of course, send our gratitude to everyone working in the health and care sectors just now. They've perhaps never had the spotlight on them more, and perhaps never deserved our praise and thanks more than they do now. So that is all we've got time for this evening. I'd like to thank Sam and Chris for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have them. And we'd like to thank you at home for joining us as well. The shows wouldn't be worth doing if we didn't have an audience, so thank you for joining us. If you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, we would very much appreciate it. So if you can support us with a few quid, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month will make a huge difference to what we're able to do here at Broadcasting Scotland. If you're not able to support us financially, then please don't worry about that. We do understand, and we assure you that the shows will always be free to view online. You can help us out though by being our marketing team. Follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, or find us on Facebook. Just search Broadcasting Scotland. We should pop right up. From there, please share the shows around. Let people know why you watch Broadcasting Scotland. Let them know what the shows are about, what the channel is about, and hopefully your recommendation will be enough to make a few more people tune in. That's how we're going to build our audiences, and from there build the channel. So please do that if you can. And finally, if you'd like to get involved here, there is always work to be done. So whether it's as a journalist, as a camera operator, as a vision mixer, as a producer, or working here at the desk actually reporting the stories, there's always work to be done. So do please get in touch if you have any interest in getting involved in TV production here in Scotland. We need all the bodies we can get to start really building the kind of channel that Scotland deserves. But that is all we've got time for tonight. I'll be back again tomorrow night, and I'm not sure when Sam or Chris will be back, but no doubt very soon. So thanks once again to them. Thank you once again for joining us. And until tomorrow, have a wonderful evening. Good night.